All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back for week 2 of Black Philanthropy Month for another episode of Give Black, Give Back Conversations. What most people may not remember is that Give Black, Give Back was actually birthed out of Black Philanthropy Month about 2 years ago. So we're really excited to talk with someone who has a large influence on that happening. I am Kia Jarman, co-chair of Give Black, Give Back, and we are an initiative in collaboration with the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. Every other month, we join the platform to make sure that we amplify the $11 billion of annual household giving in the Black community. Let me repeat, 11 billion with a B dollars coming out of Black households all across the country. And that's just the trackable funds. Give Black, Give Back's mission really has 3 purposes. One is to amplify and serve as a resource for those Black-led, Black-initiated organizations that are housed, or funds that are housed right at the Community Foundation. We also work to support the efforts of Black-led nonprofits in our community to make sure that we are giving and receiving within our own community. And we're always here to provide resource and access to information that really helps for everyone to understand the resource gap that we have in the Black community to strengthen our economy. We really need to understand what that is. So as a result, we are making sure that during Black Philanthropy Month that we're highlighting those every week. So every other month you can be here, but every week we're here during this particular month. I want to give a special announcement around tomorrow being Black Philanthropy Day. So that is August the 13th. Mayor John Cooper has deemed that Black Philanthropy Day. I want to encourage you to go to our website, blackgivingback.com, and give your money, or reach out to someone, give your time or your talent, or you can also go on there and share your story with you, which is your testimony. So those are the 4 areas we highlight during every single month, but in particular during this month, Black Philanthropy Month. We have a really special guest with us, and I want the co-chair that co-labors with me in this, Lisa Swift-Young, if she will come on and introduce our amazing guest that we have today.
Good morning, everybody, or whenever you're watching this broadcast. I promise this will be something that's worth your time. We have Valaida Fullwood. For those of you who do not know, she has an illustrious background, and you can check her out on LinkedIn, and she's willing to join and share her knowledge from there. But she's a social innovator, the Giving Black Project. She is a co-founder of the new generation of African-American philanthropists. She's the author of Giving Back, the tribute to generations of African-American philanthropists. She's the exhibit court creator for Giving Back, the Soul of Philanthropy Reframed and Exhibited, and the co-architect of Black Philanthropy Month. Now that's a lot, but there's even more. So this next hour is going to be powerful. It will give you insight into many different things on how Ms. Valaida was able to do all these different things, her origin story, how things get started. So Valaida, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us today. We are more than honored to have you here and for you to share some of your jewels of knowledge and pearls with us. And so we're going to jump right in because we know we have a ton of things we want to ask you. We want to just kind of soak up all your knowledge and kind of tell those stories. And the very first story, has to be, what is the catalyst for beginning your philanthropy journey? What was your origin story?
Wow, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Kia. I'm happy to be a part of this conversation. Really impressed with your work in Nashville. And as far as my philanthropy origin story, it really goes back to my childhood and my family, my community, my church, and just witnessing the generosity, the fellowship, the relationships, the giving that took place all around me. And that really shaped who I am. And later in life, in working as a consultant in the philanthropic realm, seeing in institutional philanthropy, often our stories of giving, Black stories of giving, were erased from the imagery and stories of Black philanthropy really struck me. And particularly when we were included, we were often the people in need and only the beneficiaries, and then on that side of the equation. But I knew a different story, a more inclusive, broader story that, yes, while at times we all are in need or beneficiaries, in the Black community, we also show up strong as benefactors and givers and philanthropists, and was inspired by that and really wanted to elevate those stories, elevate my presence in the community as a giver. So I helped start a giving circle, new generation of African-American philanthropists. And I often say that being part of a giving circle changed my life. And if you're unfamiliar with what a giving circle is, it takes all kinds of forms. It's kind of like a book club, depending on who comes to the table, how big it can be, or how small and intimate it can be, how informal the group can be, or how structured and formal the group can be. And our circle is has grown into about 50 people. We're still relatively informal. We have a flat structure, not a lot of hierarchy. And we pool our funds, our charitable dollars, and we give back. So we make grants to nonprofits in the community. We give our time, we give our talent, we give our testimony and truth, as you spoke of earlier, and we give our social capital or the ties we have in our community. So, and being a part of that group really activated my desire to go further. And in fact, I was inspired to write the book, Giving Back, that you mentioned earlier, that was later reimagined as a touring museum exhibition called the Soul of Philanthropy. And writing the book gave me opportunities to travel around the country and engage with other folks, Black people doing amazing things in their community, pooling their dollars, giving back, and leading change. So it's been an interesting trajectory over the last 15 years or so, and I'm grateful for it. And it's not just me, other members of my giving circle have seen and experienced comparable transformations personally and professionally as a part of, or as a result of being part of a giving circle.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I had an opportunity to moderate a panel that Dr. Jackie Copeland was on a few months ago, and I love to listen to her, similarly to your story as well. And one thing that she wants to make sure is abundantly clear is how we've always had a legacy of giving and always had a background of giving. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that as you were studying for the book, and even studying in your own journey as a consultant. Thinking about how we brought this from the continent of Africa. It did not start here. As one of our panelists was mentioning, we carried philanthropy with us through the transatlantic slave passage. It's something that we've always had. And so I really want to amplify that point a little bit more. Can you talk about that as you think about the research that you did to do the book?
Yeah, I'm so happy to share that. The book Giving Back opens with, we have always been philanthropists, and really grounding ourselves in that. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not owning that fact and acknowledging our giving. While mainstream philanthropy, conventional ideas around philanthropy often exclude us, I lament the fact that too many people in the Black community discount their giving. And because perhaps it's small dollars, or perhaps it's not Bill Gates or Oprah Winfrey style philanthropy and giving, that we underestimate its potency and power to lead change. So yes, in the book Giving Back, I had the pleasure of spending 4.5 years interviewing over 200 Black donors across the country, asking why and how they give, and hearing people's stories. Actually, because so many of us are modest about our giving, and we're all taught not to boast or brag about it, it's really hard to elicit stories from people. And because people didn't see themselves as philanthropists. But as I delved deeper and they got the concept and really recognized the power of their giving, people opened up and often shared who influenced their giving. And it was wonderful and a real honor to listen to those stories and to write those stories. And so much of it is acknowledged. It's just in our DNA. As you mentioned, we carried it over from the continent of Africa. The sense that our community, our focus on the community, more so than on the individual, and really having that communal spirit that is threaded through our stories of philanthropy, going back to, yes, the slave era when we first arrived on these shores 400 plus years ago, and how free Black people would pool their dollars to buy the freedom of family members and friends. And we see those examples throughout our history. And one of the things I often note is how things that we were denied, we look for ways to make that happen for other people. So oftentimes it's something that we never had and don't have, that we want to open up a door and provide an opportunity for others. So some of the defining elements I've observed that make Black philanthropy, and speak to the traditions, because I like to remind people, Black philanthropy is not just Black people giving. It comes of a tradition, it's a spirit, it's principles, it's beliefs behind that giving. And it shows up as relational, really about relationships more so than transactional. It is about social justice, breaking down barriers and creating new access and opportunities, and disrupting systems that deny people opportunity. As I mentioned before, there are so many stories of Black people. One in particular, Catherine Ferguson, comes to mind, a famous Black woman from the, I think she was born in the 1700s, and in the 19th century was noted as a philanthropist. So this woman was born enslaved, lost family members and children during that harsh, horrible era, was eventually able to buy her freedom. And even though she was illiterate, she founded the first Sunday schools in New York that were Bible study classes for child laborers, not just Black children, but children of all races who were working in the factories and harsh conditions in New York, that she would bake and raise money to offer this school to the kids. And when she passed on, the New York Times, in her obituary, acknowledged her as a philanthropist. So there's so many stories and examples of how we've carried on those traditions. Catherine Ferguson is a wonderful example of social justice philanthropy, and our finding a way out of no way and offering things that were denied us, providing it for others, which is just so inspiring for me, that whole idea. We also, a defining element is we give more than just dollars. So our philanthropy encompasses many things. Kia mentioned earlier: time, talent, treasure, our truth and testimony in the power of our stories. It's also our relationships in community, or our ties to community. So we supersize the 3 T's and bring all of ourselves in our giving. And that's one of the beautiful things. And the thing I love about Black Philanthropy Month, that we can lift up these stories and celebrate these traditions and ensure that future generations have these examples for inspiration, these models to build on, and just as I did as a child growing up.
That's amazing. That is so helpful. And thank you for giving that little peek of the book. We want people to go out and get the book, obviously, from that standpoint. So it's Valaida Fullwood, and it's called Giving Back. And you can check it out yourself and get a lot more stories. I know she shares, again, she said 4 years in the making of doing that. So, if to see ourselves as philanthropists, that's part of what we're doing here, is making sure that we as African Americans own the title philanthropist. As your organization is, African-American philanthropists, right? So let's say the word Black philanthropist, let's say it from that standpoint. And you eloquently place like how Black philanthropy is different. You know, Kia mentioned a statistic that we share a lot, the $11 billion that African-Americans contribute in philanthropy wise, right? So that's what we're giving. A lot of that ends up going to religious organizations, but we do give to different entities as well. But then what's not even quantified, as you eloquently point out, is that time and talent. Like, how much do we give from that standpoint? So for those of you out here who are not thinking you're a philanthropist, definitely take a look at that. Now, as the founder of the new generation of African-American philanthropists, could you share a couple of best practices? If someone's really super excited now, they're like, I want to start a giving circle, I want to start a foundation. What are some things that you've learned over the past since you sort of co-founded that organization?
Yes, this year we're celebrating our 15th anniversary. So when I think back, some of the elements that have been successful for us is keeping ourselves agile, to be responsive to the community, to be responsive to the members that have come together. Each circle that I've experienced, each one has, beyond my own, has its own flavor, its own personality based on the people at the table. And we found in our circle, much of our membership are very engaged, busy people in the community. And so we didn't want it overly structured because they're already active, of course, in their jobs, overachievers, and involved in their church, involved in the fraternities and sororities and other community and social and civic organizations. So they don't have a whole lot of time to give. So definitely pulling the dollars is key, and tapping members as needed based on the gifts and time that they do have, that we do that in a very strategic way. People can step up and out of the circle as needed. I'm so happy just last week, one of our founding members who was part of the journey back in 2006 rejoined. He had to step away due to demands on, in his family, in his work, to step away from the circle, but always still there, in a tangential way. And I saw where he had contributed to our fund. And I thought, wow, I wonder, did Eric do that to acknowledge our anniversary or what? And when I reached out to say, hey, was this a contribution, or are you reinstating your membership? So he's back. He said, yes, had to step away for a few years, but it's overdue, I'm back. So we have those stories all along in our circle's evolution, and often say we're a giving circle and we are a forgiving circle. Not that anybody has anything to apologize for, but life happens. And sometimes you can't engage the way you might want or the way you once did. And we get that and we forgive it. And you're welcome back when you're able to re-engage financially, time-wise. We really take people as they are. And that's a spirit for our circle that it has helped us with our longevity. And that forgiveness applies to me as a leader of the circle over these years. I can't always show up or do things the way I would want to or aspire to do, but the members are okay with that. We keep on keeping on. And I would also say that another key is, giving yourself grace in terms of what you're able to do. We all have big aspirations and big visions and hopes for our community. And find your niche, find your thing that you can do to have an impact. It may not look like what another circle or collective giving group is doing. And that's part of the strength of our collective giving groups. It may not be like the major family foundation in your community or a major philanthropic institution in your community, but find a way you can have influence and power and give back to lead change where you are. So those are a few tips that I've learned along the way, being a part of a giving circle. Oh, one last one I would say, I guess metaphorically, the circle truly is a circle in that our giving to the community, the grants we make, our service in the community does come back. It comes full circle, back to us and continues to have a ripple effect. as members and individuals, we're changed as much as a leader of a nonprofit or a nonprofit operating in the community by the collective giving, the collective learning, the relationship building. We grow and evolve as much or more sometimes than I think people acknowledge or estimate. So it's a beautiful gift in that way.
Yeah, anybody who watches these knows they can see me looking down often because I'm usually taking notes. I know I can go back and watch, but I really like in real time to take notes. So thank you. I have a page full of notes here. And you actually answered one of my questions, but I want to ask it again around the modesty of Black philanthropy. That's, I don't know, that's a blog or something. We're going to figure out how to co-write or what have you. But because I think that's a real piece to why Lisa and I really were encouraged to come together to create Give Black, Give Back locally, was because we both understood that it needed to be a part of our life and not just, oh, by the way, and you just mentioned that with the gentleman who stepped out for a moment and came back. It's a part of his life. He didn't forget what he was doing. He had to just pivot in the moment. When you think about some of the unknown stories of Black philanthropy or the modesty of Black philanthropy, thinking back to your book, is there another story? You already gave us one really amazing story. Is there another story of someone who's made a really important impact to our world and our economy and our lives that we're just not aware of? Or I want to make sure that we're highlighting as many folks as we can while we can, but is there anybody who was super modest, but they had a really grand story, or someone that you heard of?
Yeah, I have so many. So I'm going to try to pop out as many as I can in a short time frame. So one of the biggest stories that inspires me, in fact, I joke that I have a historical crush on these two men. They're long dead and buried, but their story and power in the world just provides great inspiration. And these are Absalon Jones and Richard Allen, whose names might be familiar for people involved in the church. And sometimes perhaps a little known story is how they were instrumental in framing what we call American philanthropy. We get erased from so much of American history that we have to go back in the annals and see the real story in real time to bring it back to present time, to offer that counter narrative and to really push back on the erasure that has occurred over time. So with Absalon Jones and Richard Allen, they were founders of the Free African Society, which was a mutual aid society in Philadelphia. And they provided communal support to other free Black people and just even enslaved Black people during that era. And one thing to note is in 1793, during the yellow fever epidemic, which we can appreciate now that we're in the midst of the second flare-up of our COVID-19 pandemic. But in 1793, Philadelphia and the country, but Philadelphia was hit particularly hard with the yellow fever epidemic. And at the time, there was the false belief that people of African descent were immune from the virus or the disease. And so city leaders, many of the founding fathers, in fact, because Philadelphia was, I think, America's capital at that time, came to Richard and Absalon and asked them to help lead efforts to tend to the sick and dying, help with burials, etc. So they mobilized members of the Free African Society and offered and provided that support. Of course, in the process, quickly learned that no, we weren't immune. Nevertheless, the group provided support and were instrumental in helping the city of Philadelphia get through and survive the epidemic. And their example of communal groups or bringing people together, mobilizing action at a time of crisis, of course, is key to what we know and are proud of in American philanthropy and how we come together as communities. And so they help set a frame and lead during a pivotal time in our early country's development. I mean, at the time, America was only 20 some years old, if that, barely 20 years old. And their example, and of course their roles in the church, again, have not only framed American philanthropy, but have been central to what we know as Black philanthropy here in the States. So that's one story I love telling because it goes back to the beginning of our country. And another story I like to share is about Georgia Gilmore, who some people may know played a central role during the Montgomery bus boycott. She was a popular, well-known cook in town. And during I think it was 1954, 1955, during the boycott, she brought together women, a group of women who were cooks, and they fed folks and raised money to help advance that boycott and lead in the civil rights era and that whole movement. So the movement was funded by a group of women who called themselves the Club from Nowhere. And these kind of philanthropists have existed all across time, and similar to Absalon Jones and Richard Allen, Georgia mobilized the women around her and the people with the skill set that was needed at the time to work through a crisis. And I love that example. And again, a point of pride for Black people in philanthropy that we often don't know or don't celebrate. And then another story, untold or seldom told story, is Mattel Dawson. And he was a forklift operator at Ford Motor Company in Detroit. And he lived a very modest life, saved all his coins, and worked well beyond his retirement age, in fact, into his 80s at Ford Motor Company. And over a lifetime gave over $1 million to universities and institutions across the country. So his story is very inspiring and shows the power of people of modest means, modest backgrounds, how if we are strategic and thoughtful and intentional with how we give and how we invest our resources into the community, we can be as powerful and transformational in people's lives as Bill Gates or Oprah or any other, big name philanthropists that we've all heard of. So those were 3 quick stories of how we do and examples of we have always been philanthropists.
Awesome. That's amazing. You gave a lot of really interesting stories. I was raised AME, so I've obviously heard. so that was definitely one of those things where, so all of those AME people out there, make sure we share that story as well. So one of the things in particular that you kind of alluded to is that all these stories are obviously in the book, but there's also an exhibit called the Soul of Philanthropy exhibit. And so tell me just a little bit about the future of that exhibit and where is it going now and what are you guys doing with that?
Yeah, let me correct. The book has brief mentions of the stories I've just told, but most of the stories compiled in the book, and it's a 400-page book, are contemporaries. So it's people living today and my interviewing them and asking them who inspired you to give. And they share their stories. Some of them kind of tribute stories to the people who inspired them. And as well as some quotes and little vignettes integrated that highlight a few of the stories I just mentioned today. But you asked about the Soul of Philanthropy. So the book Giving Back was published in 2011, so 10 years ago. And all the sales from the book go back to our giving circle. So it truly does give back. 100% of all the book sales help support New Generation of African American Philanthropists, or NGAP, my giving circle, in its civic engagement and grant making. About 5 years ago, or maybe 6 years ago now, we had an opportunity to reimagine the book as a multimedia museum exhibition. And we partnered with the HBCU here where I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is Johnson C. Smith. We partnered and received major funding to create the Soul of Philanthropy. So we took content from the book, which is a mix of the stories I shared earlier. And I also, in developing the book, collaborated with Charles Thomas, a fellow member of our Giving Circle, who's a photographer, and he captured imagery. So it's a pairing of these vignette stories and Black and white photography that really remind us all that philanthropy is deeper than your pockets. And so I thought that was really important for us, really to show the essence and the spirit. And it's not necessarily the headshots on walls with the board members that you see in hospitals and boardrooms, that philanthropy in the African-American tradition really is way deeper than that. And so the imagery that Charles captured, I hope lifts up the joy, the perseverance, the compassion that shows up in our giving. And so we wanted to reimagine that in a multimedia way. In partnering with Johnson C. Smith, we wanted it to have intergenerational appeal. So students were included and offered input on how we created the exhibition. So we wanted it more than just book pages on a wall. And we created something that really illuminates the heart, the soul of giving in our community. And that isn't exclusive to the Black community, but the exhibit centers the Black experience and providing inspiration and examples for all. And we use technology, their iPads, there's imagery on the walls, it's interactive. And we've been excited that in the past 5 or 6 years, it has toured to 24 different communities and been hosted at HBCUs, at predominantly white universities and institutions, at museums, public libraries, and a variety of cultural institutions across the country. And folks have leveraged it to be a vehicle to advance local conversations and work around elevating Black philanthropy and leading social and racial change or equity and racial justice. So we're really proud about how it's evolved, and the fact that it's more than an art exhibition, so to speak, but provides an opportunity for really rich programming to discuss all kinds of facets of philanthropy, whether it's our faith-based traditions and engaging the Black church and philanthropy. Oftentimes that's a program that communities host, and delve into the questions and hear from church leaders around giving and their role in the community. It's an opportunity to bring, as I mentioned, younger generations, whether those are school-age kids, to begin learning early and sharing their stories of philanthropy, to young professionals that host events and really lift up the spirit of their giving and questions they have about engaging in philanthropy, and also other cultures of giving. We acknowledge how our history in America, our cultural influences from the continent of Africa have shaped how we give hundreds of years and centuries later. And it opens a door to hear from other Black people with immigrant stories, to share their stories and to note the commonalities and the differences. Latinx people in the community, to share their stories and the influences and what philanthropy looks like in their communities. Native American people, Asian American people, Jewish giving, women's giving. Again, centering our stories and open the door to hear a more inclusive spectrum of stories about philanthropy and giving.
Yeah, again, lots of notes. I really like this quote, philanthropy is deeper than your pocket. I hope that if there is nothing else that people get from our conversation today, I mean, I want them to get lots of things, of course, but that is so central to the work we're doing here, the work you all are doing with Black Philanthropy Month, and then also all of the work you're doing across the country. Simple question, how do we get the exhibit in Nashville? What's the process? I like to document things so that we can always go back. That's a lot of what Lisa and I are doing. We like to hold people accountable, challenge systems, as you mentioned. So when we mention this on the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee's page, then we get a little bit of opportunity to maybe leverage that to see how we get that exhibit here. But what's that process?
Yeah, and it is a process, admittedly, because we really want it to be useful locally and really advance local work. So it's generally a 1.5 to 2 year runway to plan for it. You got all the starting ingredients, which is interest and a variety of groups. So I often say it requires a collaboration. And so we're excited about that because it's an opportunity to create new relationships and to collaborate differently to kind of shift some things in philanthropy. Oftentimes, some of the most prominent philanthropic institutions in a community aren't as well connected or known or respected in the Black community as they might hope or aspire to be or need to be. And so hosting the Soul of Philanthropy is an opportunity to bring together what might be unlikely suspects in a local context. And so it requires a legacy Black institution or some Black organization grounded and with relationships and with the cultural competency to engage with the Black community. It requires an institution with experience and expertise in hosting an exhibition. So with gallery space and with, the curators and with space to host programs. And then the third element is generally a philanthropic institution, a foundation whose mission is grounded in advancing philanthropy. And so at the core, you need a mix of those three and then, expand beyond that. Sometimes you get a twofer, which is an institution whose mission is grounded in philanthropy, and it might also have exhibition expertise and capabilities, or it may have been Black founded and grounded in the Black community. But in any case, you need those elements present, and then a broader pool of organizations buying in and being supportive. While there's a cost to hosting the exhibition, the biggest costs really are locally in terms of communication, marketing, and the programming, bringing people together, hosting conversations, having panel discussions in person or virtually to really leverage the exhibition. So it takes a while to get all those pieces together, to get the group together, to set the vision, and to be intentional about why you're bringing the exhibition and investing all these resources to have this conversation. What is it to advance something that currently exists? Is it to launch something new? So anyway, those are some of the factors and considerations for communities looking to host the exhibit. And so when after a year or 2 years, when it actually opens in a city, you can be very satisfied, get the response you want from the community and have the impact. So after 3 months, when the exhibit is left, that it has really created some momentum and advanced what you want to see in your city. So Cleveland, Ohio was one of the last places to host the exhibit. One of the things I love and just love observing is how each city that hosts it, raises the game. So they take lessons from the prior city and they innovate, and then they do something different and bigger and relevant to their city. So seeing the local flavor show up, excuse me, in the local exhibit and programming is great to see from city to city, and how the concept is sort of mutable based on who's hosting it. So we have a group in Chicago now who's gearing up for an exhibition. I'm in talks with some folks in Arkansas and some other cities across the country, getting those seeds started, and look forward to perhaps having a conversation with you guys in Nashville.
Oh yeah, I've got so many thoughts.
So Dr. Glover, know that we're coming to talk to you, and Dr. Hildreth over at Meharry. We're going to have a lot of conversations with our HBCU colleges here to sort of have those conversations. So we will make sure that they get this information and get as excited as we are. So we will show up and show out. So we are definitely very interested in doing that. So thank you so much for sort of sharing that. Just real quick, so Black Philanthropy Month is a national initiative. It's a global initiative specifically. Like, tell me a little bit more about like how the global initiative actually started and how that process, what was that process like?
Yes, happy to share that. You know, again, this is the 10th year and we're excited to mark a decade. And Jackie Copeland is the founder of Black Philanthropy Month. She has been part of a women's group that at one point was called the Pan-African Women's Philanthropy Network. It's since evolved and its name is Reunity. And it's Black women from across the diaspora who came together to really elevate their work and support each other as philanthropists in their communities. And in 2011, there was a global summit held in Minneapolis, and women from dozens of countries joined and from across the country. I was in the process, my book was going to be released a few months later, so I was invited to attend. And it was there that Jackie first proclaimed every August Black Philanthropy Month. And she'd gotten proclamations from the mayors of St. Paul and Minneapolis and from state leaders in Congress in the state of Minnesota. And so that was an exciting idea that we could have a Black Philanthropy Month. And so a few years later, as I was rolling out my book and doing book talks across the country, and knew that there was so much interest and all kinds of groups popping up across the country, advancing Black philanthropy. And a good friend who's the founder of blackgivesback.com, popular blog that existed and has since ended, but that's Tracy Webb in DC with Black Benefactors, the collective giving group. So I'm like, Tracy, with your following on social media and your blog, and with me doing book talks across the country, we should connect with Jackie and her international network of women and really take Black Philanthropy Month to a whole new level. So this was in 2013. We reached out to Jackie. I mean, she kind of thought it was like a wild idea, like whatever, sure, yeah, okay. And we did and had amazing response and, you know, just took off in terms of people being empowered to celebrate and tell their stories and to lead fundraising campaigns and back to school book drives and all kinds of philanthropic initiatives, showing appreciation to their Black donors and telling little known stories and writing op-eds. And then it's just continued to grow since. More cities, in fact, you know, 35 plus cities and governmental bodies have proclaimed every August Black Philanthropy Month. I know you guys do that in Nashville, and particularly last year with the pandemic and the recognition of the toll COVID-19 was taking on Black communities everywhere, and how anti-Black bias and stereotypes and hate was bubbling up everywhere, whether you were Black in Rio de Janeiro or in Beijing or in Norway or wherever we were encountering and experiencing many of the same things. And so we saw an increased interest in coming together in celebration of Black Philanthropy Month, specifically to advance racial funding equity, acknowledging the power and strengthen our communities, and really calling on funders and to be accountable to Black communities with all the unity statements and solidarity statements in the midst of the Black protest, knowing we had a responsibility to ensure these organizations were accountable to themselves and what they were saying in terms of their commitments to the Black community. So fortunately, this year, we had Black Philanthropy Month events led by groups in Brazil, Africa, Canada, and the Caribbean. So while BPM has always been global in its intent and in its presence and founding, really it showed up in a strong way last year and this year.
Yes, that's so exciting. That's so exciting. And as Valaida just mentioned, we are gearing up for tomorrow, which is our Black Philanthropy Day, as well as celebration of Black Philanthropy Month here in Nashville. If you're just joining in, I know we're getting on the other end of our conversation, but we are talking with Valaida Fullwood, one of the co-architects of Black Philanthropy Month, as well as a host of other things. You can scroll back up and see her LinkedIn account, and you can see all the amazingness of who she is as an author, as an innovator in our world. And so we're so grateful to her. I have a question about the next generation. So you mentioned that a little bit in our conversation, thinking about how we make sure the next generation understands the impact of all the work that you've been doing. Can you share a little bit more about either what you've seen work across the country to get young people engaged in their own philanthropic endeavors? Is there any innovation that you're seeing that's really key? Share a little bit more about that. Uh-oh, you're on mute.
With the Soul of Philanthropy, I have had a chance to see different ways communities are engaging younger generations. And an observation is a lot of the baggage that adults and older generations have around philanthropy and these false ideas about who can be a philanthropist or how many zeros have to be behind the dollar sign for it to really matter, that younger generations don't have all of that packed on them. So oftentimes they get it quicker and easier than older generations. So that's definitely one thing to note, that you don't have to unpack as much propaganda, I would say, for lack of a better description, with younger generations. They definitely in this era see the need and importance of coming together as Black people and being collective in leading change. I think a key is, providing space for them to talk and to share their perspectives and to, lift up stories that resonate with them and that have been part of their conversations. I know when we had the inaugural exhibition of the Soul of Philanthropy at Johnson C. Smith, we did a couple of things with the student body there. We hosted a panel discussion with Black philanthropy and foundation professionals to talk about their work, so that younger generations can see professional work in the field of philanthropy as an option for themselves, that there are a host of roles you can play, whether it's as a program officer, a development officer, someone who's managing the finance of a foundation or communications of a foundation, a whole range of interests and majors and careers are options in the field of philanthropy. And many of us are unaware of that and haven't been exposed to the back operations of foundations or never even thought about it. So that was key to even have young people begin thinking about their careers in philanthropy, in institutional philanthropy, and formal philanthropy. We also had a conversation with people who were leading hip hop initiatives in the area, in the region. There was a gentleman, a DJ out of Atlanta, who runs Hip Hop Gives Back, I think is the name of it. And so had him talk about some of the DJing events and community-based events that he does to raise funds and resources and to really set an example for giving back. And at the time, again, this was 5 or 6 years ago, there are often debates about whether it's what hip hop artists, where they're giving their money and what they're investing in, whether it's Black-led institutions and organizations, and everybody's got an opinion on these things and how they show up, whether it's, you know, Beyonce or Rihanna or Dr. Dre or whoever. So having a forum to lift up some of those examples and really look at, you know, what works or doesn't work with some of these approaches, or how younger generations might rethink, or what they would do with their funds, using these high profile examples that they're familiar with, and helping to frame how they think about their giving and how they can have an impact in community, given that much of hip hop is based in community change and a form of activism, and a dimension of Black philanthropy, how we do and lead change in our communities and give voice and testimony to injustice and disparities.
Yeah, that's such an important part, because just a modeling of what you're talking about. I think about our advisory committee, where Brandon Hill is on our committee. He shouldn't mind me saying this. He used to be a rapper in our local community. And I think about Eric Brown, who now works at the mayor's office. His theology degree was in hip hop and theology. And so we have people right here locally who have that talent, and who have already expressed their interest in their time. And so it's letting us know that we're right on track with that. I also, though, appreciate you bringing in philanthropy as a professional career. Our next conversation next week, part of it will be around self-care, but who's leading it is, or co-leading the conversation that Lisa and I will moderate, is Jennifer, what's Jennifer Oldham? Sorry, it's like, what's Jennifer's last name? I know it. Jennifer Oldham with the Healing Trust, which is one of our professional foundations here in our city. And she's going to talk about self-care and why that's so important. But she's one of very, very few Black women across the state of Tennessee who works in professional philanthropy. Along Audra is another, Erica Burnett is in Chattanooga. So we have some women, but very, very few who are Black women who are working in that way. So just even exposure to the career, I believe, is important. So I appreciate you bringing those in and reminding us that, again, how the range or the length of philanthropy and how far it can go.
Yeah. And I do want to bring something back. I made a reference to something being full circle earlier, and I want to share something, a Nashville story. In fact, with the book Giving Back, it was, about 14 years ago, I guess, because I mentioned our giving circle is 15 years old, and about a year into our development, I had an opportunity to go to a Women's Funding Network conference in Seattle with a group of other women from across my state, North Carolina, who were forming giving circles in other cities. And while I was there, I had lunch with a woman, and she told me about a really impressive conference session she had been to earlier. And it was a story of a women's fund in Tennessee who had, was about 10 years old, or had been running an initiative for about 10 years. I think it was like the Power of the Purse or something like that, a luncheon that they did every year and a booklet that they created every year. And over that 10-year period had raised $1 million. And I remember like, wow. And, listening to this and then reading about it in the conference booklet, and really went to my room that night. And I often say it was really a transformational moment. In hearing that story, I was so energized because I kept thinking, could we do that? I was about a year into forming my circle and knew how tough it was to bring a group of people together. Like, wow, could we do that in 10 years? Could we do that in any period? And really recognize that, maybe that was easier to do in a group of predominantly white women, perhaps white women of wealth. The fact that gap existed in the Black community toward what's philanthropy and our generosity that we kind of downplay and just refer to as giving back. And I thought, well, maybe we couldn't do a program booklet, but wonder if I wrote a book that captured our stories that really bridged that connection between giving back as we mean it in the Black community and philanthropy, which is the same thing, but bridge that connection and really lift up traditions of giving in our community. And so that night, the idea for the book, Giving Back, was seeded. And I don't know if it was the jet lag from flying from North Carolina to Seattle or what, but I was up all night taking notes, writing what I would envision the book to be and how I didn't want it like a boring academic paper, because I'd seen white papers and foundation academic papers about giving back, and I wanted something different. And continued that with that idea, but wanted something approachable that could literally be on people's coffee table. And the book, Giving Back, was conceived of that night. And essentially 4.5 years later, the book that exists today, which actually, I even sketched out what I wanted the cover to look like and everything. That 4.5 years later, that was the book that was published. So now I see and recognize that that was the work of the Women's Fund at Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee that I didn't have direct contact with, but just that seed of an idea was huge inspiration for me. That's led to Giving Back and the Soul of Philanthropy. So it's a real gift to be talking to you today during Black Philanthropy Month.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So I know we only have a few more minutes left, and we want to be respectful of your time because we know that this month is a very busy month for you as well, with all the other people who wanted to get your attention. So we want to take a couple minutes to just say thank you so much for allowing us to sort of, for sharing your knowledge with us and giving us sort of some feedback on what you're doing and what we can do here. I know the last question I'm going to ask of you is one of your many talents in your bio is an idea whisperer. And so I'm just been waiting for this opportunity to say, given your legacy and what you've done so far, what are some ideas that you can whisper to us that you would like to see, how you would like to see Black philanthropy recognized or promoted, or what do you think it should evolve to be? So I'm going to ask for you to pull those idea whisperer and share a few jewels with us.
Yes, one of our ideas or aspirations is that people leverage this month to really lead change. And increasingly now in a decade, we have celebrated, acknowledged ourselves as philanthropists. Now, how can we harness that recognition, that awakening in ways that really transform our communities? Whether it's through forming collective giving groups and funds like Giving Circles and other groups. How can we be outspoken advocates of funding equity, making sure our organizations get the fair share of philanthropic support to do the work, vital work in our communities. And if there's any doubt about the vital role Black-led, Black-founded nonprofits play in our communities, last year should have cleared all that up and made it crystal clear how oftentimes our organizations serve as the backbone of communities, not just Black communities, but a range of marginalized groups in the broader community, and a lifeline and the front line in our communities. So we need to invest in them appropriately so that they are strengthened and continue to be resources. And that is my hope, that in the celebration and recognition of our giving, that we channel that in strategic, thoughtful ways that have real lasting impact in our communities and in our organizations, our nonprofit organizations and businesses.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Kia, I don't know if you have anything before we close out.
I don't. I mean, I do, because we could go forever.
We could go
You know how we get to talk, and this has been so insightful. I've been watching the comments as well. Some great accolades there, appreciation for you being here and sharing your time with us, knowing that the goal is that Black Philanthropy Month is just a reminder of the 365 or 366 days of impact and value and contribution of Black philanthropists and the long legacy. And so we are so honored that you're here with us to really submit that statement that we have. A couple of notes before we get out of here. Number one, it is Black Philanthropy Month. We do encourage you to give. Go to blackgivingback.com and you can give there, or you can also learn more about the rest of the month for Black Philanthropy Month and our guests and what we're going to be doing. So we invite you there. As I mentioned, next week is going to be about self-care and how self-care is a large part of philanthropy. When we are not well within ourselves, of course, we're not well for our community and in our legacy. So we have two special guests, as I mentioned, Jennifer Oldham, who's a member of our advisory committee, and then also Ashley Brooke James of Triluna Wellness, who's going to be here to work with us on breathing and even stretching and doing things for the well-being of ourselves while we sit at our desks. So we'll have that. And I want to make sure that we thank the behind the scenes folks, the folks that, you know, you may see or you may talk to on the phone or you may email. Kelly Wahlberg is the one who keeps all of the information you see on Facebook going. I mean, everything you mentioned, Valaida, it's in there, literally every story. She will pull links. She is so awesome. And she's such a wonderful contributor to our Give Black, Give Back team. And so we have to give shout out to Kelly. And then we could not be or do what we do without Audra Cox, who is our wonderful co-laborer in this work and with the Community Foundation. She makes sure that everything that you all need in the community is able to happen. And if it isn't able to happen, she still makes it happen. And so we're so grateful to Audra for her time, as well as everybody else at the Community Foundation for allowing us to take over their page and have such a powerful and important voice in this space. There's one other event coming up towards the end of the month I want to mention. I'm partnering again, Give Black, Give Back is partnering again with Philanthropy Together to have the Excellence of Black Philanthropy Part 2, which is going to be about engaging the next generation. I hope that you all can come to that. Kelly will drop the link. It'll also be on the Give Black, Give Back website. And that's where you can bring your entire family, bring your kids, bring your parents, bring your grandparents, everyone being in one space so we can talk about how the next generation can get in on this legacy, this DNA, the lineage of who they are. And so we want to make sure of that. With that, we're out. That's it. Keep celebrating Black Philanthropy Month. Valaida, thank you so much. Lisa, as always, love being in co-labor with you in this work, and have a great rest of your day, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't know that they fixed it. Are we still on?